We are on episode 13 of the Summit for Wellness podcast. Here's what's coming up.
There's what we call man-made radiation. So this is stuff that's not found in nature, things that come from technology that we've created, whether it's electricity or any kind of electronic field that creates a electric field and a magnetic field. And then there's also the information traveling frequencies that are the higher frequencies that have to do with Wi-Fi and cell phones and smart meters and any wireless communication like Bluetooth or even baby monitors and those sorts of things. But the main thing with the cell phone is the high frequency radiation. The reason that it's so detrimental to health is because it has this radio wave, or also known as microwave radiation, that sends a signal all the way to the cell phone tower with all this data, and then it comes back, and usually when it comes back, it's either going through the tissue in your brain or some other part of your body. But if it's hitting any part of your body's conductive, so it acts like an antenna. When you have this voltage going through your body, you think about the muscles, and even like the heart is a muscle. And what do we do to restart a heart? We send voltage through it with a defibrillator and to restart the heart, and that basically contracts the muscle to restart it. And then you also have people who do these different therapies with these electrodes attached to their body, that when the voltage goes into the muscle, it contracts the muscle. So, what does that say about when you're sleeping on your bed and you have this voltage going through your body? You think you're getting proper rest? You think those muscles are getting the kind of rest and relaxation and restoration that they need at night? So what I've found, and what Geovital has found, is that the most important place to protect yourself is the bedroom, because that's when your body is actually restoring and repairing tissues, and your brain is being flooded with melatonin.
Welcome to the Summit for Wellness podcast, where we help you climb to the peak of your health. And now, here is your host, Brian Carroll.
Welcome to the Summit for Wellness podcast. I hope everyone's been enjoying the last few episodes that we have had. I have been working really hard on trying to get some really top-notch practitioners to come onto the show to discuss their areas of expertise. And I'm working really hard on my end to bring you guys the best type of information that I can. And I'm also trying to figure out different ways to present this information to you. So one of the things I've been looking more into is to also add in video podcasting. So we would have the audio files like this one, but then for people that are closer to me, we'll be able to do more live, in-person type videos as well as audios. So you guys can see a little bit more about the information that they may be presenting. And typically these practitioners are going to be more like physical therapists, chiropractors, people more in the movement world where they have things to show and demonstrate, and it's a lot easier to show that in a video. So keep an eye out for that. I will let everybody know when I launch that and when I start implementing that. But in the meantime, we'll stick with the audio, and I'll keep trying to find more practitioners to talk with that would be better in an audio format. I already have a couple people lined up for the video. I just need to get the equipment for that. So if there's anything specific you guys want to listen to or hear from, please let me know. Either shoot me an email or mention it in the comments so I know what people that you guys want to listen more to and learn more from. Like I said, this show is all about you guys, and I'm doing everything I can to bring you guys the best information and to provide you guys with what you want to hear. And to go along with providing the best information and health products for you guys, right now we are still offering 25% off of your first order with Thrive Market. So if you go to summitforwellness.com/thrive, then you can get 25% off of your first order. And a lot of the products on there are already close to wholesale pricing, so it's even more of a discount. So go take a look at that and see if there's any products that you want to get and take advantage of that 25% discount. In conjunction with Thrive Market, we are also about 1 week out from the Whole30 starter kit giveaway that we talked about in the last episode with Lenny. So if you have not gone onto summitforwellness.com and signed up for our newsletter, then go to the website and do that now so that you will automatically be enrolled in the raffle for the free starter pack. The episode today is talking about a subject that I really didn't know a whole lot of information about. I've been exposed to pieces of it, but I haven't delved into it very deeply, and that would be EMFs, which are electromagnetic fields. And so instead of me trying to explain what it is, I decided to bring on someone that travels around the country doing in-home inspections for people, all about EMFs and what's leaking into their house and into their bedrooms. And so our guest today knows way more information about this than I think I ever will. So hopefully you guys get a lot of information out of this episode. He definitely makes some really good valid points, especially when he goes into detail talking about what the EMFs do to the body and how if you're sleeping in that type of environment, how it can prevent you from getting the sleep that you deserve. So take a listen to this episode, let me know what you think, and let's get started. Brian is a certified nutritional therapy practitioner and a certified geobiologist trained by Geovital Academy, a 35-year running naturopathic clinic in Austria that specializes in radiation protection and environmental medicine. Brian has completed courses in advanced clinical nutrition assessment techniques, autonomic response testing with Dr. Dietrich Klinghardt at the Klinghardt Academy, and hundreds of hours of continuing education in nutrition and clinical assessment. He currently has a mobile concierge wellness practice and travels up and down the west coast of the U.S. often. He also organizes healing and educational retreats annually in Hawaii, which that sounds really nice. He lives with his wife and 3 daughters, and they are currently on a road trip with their EMF-shielded tiny house, touring along a southern route of the U.S., and will be doing tours on the East Coast this summer and again on the West Coast in September, October. Please welcome Brian Hoyer to the show.
Hey, thanks, Brian. I'm excited to be here.
Thanks for coming on. I find it a little ironic that we will be talking about EMFs and we're probably both on wireless internet. At least I know I am. But I'm sure you'll talk about that a little bit more and how to integrate that into daily lives. But can you talk a little bit about your journey to getting into the EMF field?
Sure, yeah. So, after my training with the Nutritional Therapy Association, they have all these opportunities, then you need to continue on and get more education to, keep up your certification and everything. So I, one of our mentors, John Jennis from NTA, he was trained by Dr. Klinghardt, and he uses his assessment techniques in his practice. And so I was fascinated by that and wanted to take that training as well. And so when I was taking that training, one of the main things that Dr. Klinghardt talked about was electromagnetic radiation. And he kind of explained how half his practice has half of the patients in his practice are kids with autism. And then he also has like chronic Lyme disease patients and all kinds of people like that come to him after seeing like 20 doctors that can't figure out what's wrong with them. But the very first thing that he does with them is he addresses all of the electromagnetic radiation stressors and then also the geopathic stress. So, and he's like, and he won't even schedule like the first appointment until those things have been taken care of. So it's that important to him. And I was like, oh man, I really got to pay attention to this. So I started researching and trying to understand this better, and realizing that it was a huge issue. And we'll kind of talk more about that later. But to make a long story short, I eventually found Geovital, and they kind of, in the United States, I was researching all the different types of solutions, and there was really no, like, there was no one solution for everything. And then when I found Geovital, it was like, okay, I'm going to take that training because they're at least a naturopathic clinic. They've been doing this for 30 plus years, and they know what they're doing because they try to help with the health of their patients and their, the people that come to their clinic that have issues. So I took their training. It was kind of life changing for me in my practice and seeing my clients and everything. And, from that point on, I've just kind of, I've taken the red pill and gone deeper.
Is there a difference between EMFs and geopathic stresses at all?
Yeah. So, they're all a type of electromagnetic radiation, but the difference I like to explain to people is that, there's what we call man-made radiation. So this is stuff that's not found in nature, things that come from technology that we've created, whether it's electricity or any kind of electronic field that creates a electric field and a magnetic field. And then there's also the information traveling frequencies that are the higher frequencies that have to do with Wi-Fi and cell phones and smart meters and any wireless communication like Bluetooth or, even baby monitors and those sorts of things. So, basically when I do an assessment for people, I'm testing for 4 different things. I'm testing 3 of the things are man-made or non-native electromagnetic stressors. And then the 4th thing is the natural radiation that comes up from the earth that has to do with different geologic anomalies. And then also the Earth's magnetic field, which creates lines that go north-south, east-west, and then northeast to southwest and southeast to northwest. So it's kind of like a grid line, 2 different grids. One is set north, south, east, west, and the other one's slanted sideways and kind of goes diagonal.
What do you find to be more effective against people? Is it the geopathical stresses or the man-made or the non-native EMF radiation?
Well, it's kind of, it's a package deal. When I go into someone's home, a lot of times people are just overwhelmed by all the different things that there are to take care of. But when you think about it, like that's just the way that things are when people are designing homes and not thinking about designing them as they relate to keeping the health of the person in mind. So if you think about it, we'll just kind of go through each of the maybe we should just go through each of the different types of EMF and then kind of differentiate between them, and I'll kind of tell what I typically find in a home assessment. Would that be a good way to do it?
That would be perfect.
Okay. So one of the main things that people, think about when they think of EMFs is they think of their cell phone. Oh, should I turn off my cell phone or keep my cell phone out of my bedroom at night? And but the main thing with the cell phone is the high frequency radiation. The reason that it's so detrimental to health is because it has this radio wave, or also known as microwave radiation, that sends a signal all the way to the cell phone tower with all this data, and then it comes back, and usually when it comes back, it's either going through the tissue in your brain or some other part of your body. But if it's hitting any part of your body's conductive, so it acts like an antenna. Just like there's an antenna in your phone, there's antennas where different cell phones towers meet up and transmit information back and forth between one another. So these frequencies actually are really close on the electromagnetic spectrum to different light frequencies that our body has learned to delineate from over time. and those light frequencies, normally like the blue light and then the more orange light, they tell the body different things according to what time of day it is. So like when you wake up in the morning, the blue light from the sun tells you that, hey, it's daytime. This is when we need to start producing cortisol. And so you produce more cortisol. And then as the day goes on, the different light frequencies of the sun changes and tells your body different things about which hormones to produce during the day. And then at nighttime, when the sun sets, the sun turns more orange, and the orange sun is void of the blue light. And so a lot of people wear those blue blocking glasses at night to help increase their melatonin production, if they're looking at screens or they have artificial light in their house. So that's a good thing. But what a lot of people don't realize is that these microwave and radio wave frequencies are very close on the electromagnetic spectrum to this blue light. And so the hypothalamus actually is kind of like a thermostat. It's like monitoring the environment to see if it needs to turn on any of the hormones. And so what it does is it'll detect this frequency of these radio signals or the microwave signals, and it'll kind of perceive it as if it's blue light, and so it'll up the cortisol production at exactly the wrong time. So we have all this increase of people with adrenal fatigue and adrenal issues and high cortisol states and just dysregulation with all the adrenal function and everything. And one of the root causes of that I've found in my practice is that we're being exposed to this high frequency radiation, and it's throwing off our whole endocrine system.
Interesting. So even if you're using the blue light blocker glasses or using the various apps that can block out the blue light, if you're still on your computer or your phone, then just the frequencies emitting from those devices can still keep you awake.
Right. Yeah. And, anything you can do to reduce the stress load, to reduce the blue light is good and beneficial, but you're never getting to that optimal of what our ancestors had before all these frequencies were introduced.
Interesting. So those are more the man-made frequencies. Are there other non-native type frequencies that you look for?
Yeah, so that's the high frequency radiation, and you can kind of think of that as like any information that travels through the air. And then the other things that I test for in the home are low frequency electric fields, and that comes from like wiring in the walls and anything that's plugged in that brings electric fields into the bedroom. But what's interesting is that when we're doing a home assessment, I'll put my meter up on the wall, and the wall will be electrically charged and have voltage going through it. Every wall surrounding the bed, and then if you have like a metal bed frame or springs in your mattress, it increases that voltage that's going through your body at night. So, when I go into a bedroom, I'm testing not only the walls and the lamps and everything that's plugged in, but I'm also testing the person's body. And so even if I have everything unplugged from the room and the breaker is still on, I'll put my meter on the person's body, and it'll be like having the beeping and warning signs and everything that like, hey, we have about 1,000 volts per meter going through your body right now, even though there's nothing plugged into the bedroom. And so all of that electricity comes from the wiring in the walls and just having live electricity in the walls. And that's something that we never had until about 150, 200 years ago, and it just became more widespread. So and then we can talk about the biologic effects after this, but I want to give you a chance to kind of reflect on that if you want to.
Yeah, that's really kind of fascinating and kind of scary at the same time, that even with everything unplugged, you still have radiation waves coming through. So would one of the benefits be to turn the circuit breaker off?
Yeah, that's kind of what we're trying to do when I do a home assessment. I'll test each wall, and then we'll find out which breakers are affecting each wall, And often, yesterday I did an assessment and there was 14 breakers affecting this one bedroom. It's not as simple as just finding out if where the plugs and lights are. There's also wires that cross and go other places in the house that, basically have voltage escaping onto the other wires that go into the bedroom. So you really have to have somebody who's trained to do this, to come in and figure out exactly which breakers you need to have turned off to create the proper environment. Then there's things that you can install, like a circuit cutoff switch, so you don't have to go out to the breaker box all the time. All you have to do is press this button, like a key fob, and it turns off up to 4 breakers at one time. And then, but yeah, you basically, if you have electricity on in the room, like you can plug something in and turn the light on. Even if something's not plugged in, you still have that electricity going through your body all night long. And the way I like to explain it to people is that, you think of how voltage is used in the nervous system, and especially as it has to do with muscles. And, I know in your podcast, you talk a lot about like injury recovery and the nervous system. So like EMF is like a crucial thing to think about with this, because when you have this voltage going through your body, you think about the muscles, and even like the heart is a muscle. And what do we do to restart a heart? We send voltage through it with a defibrillator and to restart the heart, and that basically contracts the muscle to restart it. And then you also have people who do these different therapies with these electrodes attached to their body, that when the voltage goes into the muscle, it contracts the muscle. So, what does that say about when you're sleeping on your bed and you have this voltage going through your body? Do you think you're getting proper rest? Do you think those muscles are getting the kind of rest and relaxation and restoration that they need at night? No, they're not. So, that's something that kind of opens people's eyes to, hey, this EMF thing isn't some hoo-ha. This is real. This is something that's affecting our bodies on a basic level. If those muscle cells and different things in the nervous system are not getting a chance to just relax and be and regenerate, they're actually being contracted by this voltage that's going across the cell membranes, then that's an issue. You're not going to wake up feeling refreshed. You're not going to a lot of people wake up sore. They have insomnia and all sorts of different symptoms that are just related to simply the electric fields.
So with that, we'll go more into how to block everything out of your bedroom. But is there like a specific level that you want to get to for the amount of voltage that's running through a bedroom?
Yeah, so the meter that I use is one that Geovital designed to, measure the walls and the body. And typically with that meter, we want to have below 30 volts per meter on the body. And that's what they found in their naturopathic clinic to be the level that people will start recovering at. And they have everything based on their clinical experience of like, okay, it has to be below this on the high frequency meter, which their high frequency meter, they also measure the body as if the body's an antenna for the cell towers and Wi-Fi and everything. So you actually hold this little antenna on the meter and it creates your body as an antenna. Whereas most other high frequency meters, they just are measuring the air. And so whatever the little antenna in the meter is picking up is what those meters pick up. But the Geovital meter actually has a place where you can use the body as an antenna, so you can see what your body's actually absorbing and being exposed to. And it creates a very different picture, and one that's a lot more meaningful because it's a body measurement, and the reason that we care about all these frequencies is because we want to know how it's impacting our bodies.
Can you give some references as to the amount of voltage per meter some devices give? So if we're looking for 30 volts per meter, what would be similar to that? And then what would like a cell phone be emitting?
Yeah, cell phone wouldn't be too much on the electric fields. So with the cell phone, you're looking at the microvolts actually is what the high frequency measures. So with the microvolts, you want below 30 microvolts ideally. And cell phones, like when I'm testing a person and I'm in a area that I can do that because it's free of the high frequency radiation, I'll have a cell phone and I'll make a call, and it'll go up to like 7,000 microvolts with
Wow.
just connecting to a phone call. And so that can be like an enormous stressor on the nervous system, and confusion for the hypothalamus, and about what time of day it is and what's going on. Like, I don't know what the brain is thinking. Maybe it's like, oh, there's a solar flare or something like that, but it can really disrupt the way that the body was meant to work, with if you're thinking about it from this ancestral perspective.
So is that the same for like if you received a text message during the night, or maybe you got an email notification? Would it be emitting those high levels of microvoltage?
Yeah, with a text message, it might not emit as much as a phone call, because a phone call is like sending a lot more information than what a text message is. But there was a story I heard about another practitioner who their son was very they called electro hypersensitive, people who are really sensitive to these non-native or man-made electromagnetic radiation. And he had his son in what they call a Faraday cage. So he had like a sleeping canopy, and his son's bedroom was right above the garage. And he was sleeping well ever since they installed this canopy. And what happened one night was his son woke up in the middle of the night screaming at 3 a.m. and he didn't know why. Like, that hadn't happened like since they installed the canopy. And so they were like confused by this. But then when he went down to his garage and looked in his truck, he had left his cell phone in there, and he got a text message from one of his coworkers at 3 a.m. And so that was just kind of one of those eye-opening stories that you hear, and like, man, this stuff really does affect people. And even though it's invisible, it has the ability to confuse our brains. And even with kids, it makes you think. Like, I have three daughters, and when they're babies, you always kind of wonder, like, sometimes they're crying and you don't know why. It always makes me wonder, like, before I knew about this stuff, I wonder how many times they were crying because of this radiation, and we're thinking, oh, they're just fussy, we can't calm them down, and that sort of thing, but it's just something interesting to think about.
And to take that point, you talked about the baby monitors before and how they emit EMFs as well. So if you have that right next to your baby, I'm sure that's causing some distress to their bodies.
Oh yeah. I've tested some baby monitors that are actually worse than cell phones, and it's insane. It's like basically having a cell phone tower next to your baby in the house. So it can be very disruptive. And we kind of got around that because we found attachment parenting and do co-sleeping and stuff like that with the kids. But if you're wanting to go the baby monitor route, there are some options that are lower EMF, and but I haven't tested all of them. They claim to be lower EMF or lower emitting, but if you can get a wired version of anything, it's always better.
So then we talked about the microvolts. Can you give some examples of regular voltage and what would be around 30 volts per meter or greater?
Yeah, so like any on typical meters that you can get at like the hardware store, you're looking for even a lower voltage on those, like 0.3 volts. The meter I use is specialized for home assessments, and so you're looking for 30 volts per meter on that one. But basically, like the ground in the house, if you shut off all your power and then put the meter to your body, you should be just below 30 volts. And or if we find the specific breakers that are affecting the bedroom, we can get down to that. But just as a general rule, you can get it down to the amount that that is optimal by shutting off the main power. And that's assuming that your grounding isn't messed up from electric fields that are coming in on the main source, because you can't shut off the wire that actually comes to the house, or and then sometimes there's an electric current that comes in on people's water pipes and things from the neighborhood, when there's a wire crossing a pipe, and then there's voltage that actually spreads through a whole neighborhood because of one person or several people like having a wiring error where they have the wire going over the water pipes.
Wow, so it might not even be directly at your house. It could be something that, like you said, they laid a wire over a pipe and the pipe is coming directly to your house, and then that could cause the frequencies just from that.
Yeah, that can cause an electric current in the grounding system, or it can even cause like high magnetic fields all along the water pipes in the house, which is a different one that we haven't addressed yet. But yeah, there's typically in most about 50% of houses you get that problem, but a lot of the time you just shut off the main power and you should get a good reading. And that's something you can kind of do to test, is if you feel like you're always antsy and always like nervous and agitated or whatever, shut off the power to your house and just take a nap. Let the fridge go for like a few hours, without power, and just take a nap without the electricity on, and see how you feel. See if you can get better rest. And a lot of people they'll do that. They'll shut off the power to their whole house, and they'll just feel like, oh my gosh, it feels so quiet here. I don't feel this buzzing sound, this nervous tension that I normally have. And that's the way that we're meant to sleep. When we're camping, we kind of experience that kind of sleep, and we always tend to go to bed earlier when we're camping because of the light environment, and also because we're not as exposed to the all these electromagnetic fields.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that, because I do a ton of backpacking, and I get some of the best nights of sleep when I'm out in the mountains, because I'm away from the noise, I'm away from all the EMFs, don't have my any electrical device with me. And like you said, once the sun goes down, I go to sleep. When the sun comes up, I wake up. And even though sometimes the ground might not be that comfortable or the climate might not be that comfortable, I still feel pretty rested in the mornings.
Yeah, and so it's just like you're eliminating 3 of the 4 stressors that I would test for in a home assessment just by going out in nature. Somewhat, there's still probably some cell phone towers that are reaching out there, possibly, or overhead satellite and that sort of thing. But I mean, you're drastically reducing anything when you're going out in the middle of nowhere and sleeping on the ground and there's no electricity around. It can be a very rejuvenating experience to just be in nature like that.
One of the things I've been noticing more and more when I go out is, it used to be I could never find cell service, and now more and more places have cell service pretty much the entire time you're hiking. So I don't know if it's because of more cell towers or the cell signals are stronger. I'm not really sure what causes that, but it's kind of concerning that it's getting tougher to break away from those EMFs.
Yeah, definitely. And that's why, I'm finding more and more that, that one of the solution that we have for the high frequency is to actually shield the bedroom with this shielding paint. It's called T98 alpha shielding paint. And it has graphite and carbon in it, and it's like 0.2 VOC. So they try to make it as inert as possible. But you cover the whole bedroom in this, and it blocks out all the cell phone frequencies as much as possible. And, it goes up to 20 gigahertz. So, and that's there are some cell phone towers out there that are operating at 19 and 20 gigahertz right now. So, when you think about it from the cell phone perspective, you're thinking of 3G means the G stands for gigahertz, so 3 gigahertz. 4G is 4 gigahertz, and then 5G that's coming out now is 5 gigahertz. But the towers, so basically our phones are going to be operating at those levels. The towers are already operating at levels of like 6, 10, 12, 19 gigahertz. So, that's kind of something that Geovital had in mind when they designed their paint, was like, there's other shielding paints on the market that are shielding like really well up to 3 gigahertz, but we're way beyond that now. So they're kind of a lot more, not as adequate as shielding against those higher frequencies, which are the ones that are more damaging. So, you paint the room with one layer, and then you actually use grounding tape around all the edge of the room, then up one wall and then the ceiling. And what that does is it grounds the entire room, so it traps the electric fields in the walls. So when I go to test a person's body, that voltage will be down as long as there's nothing plugged into the wall that's bringing the electric field in. If I test a person's body after they have a shielded bedroom with the grounding tape, their voltage should be down right where we like it. And that's also assuming that the floor doesn't have an electric field. And if that's the case, then we have this mesh that we put down underneath the bed to draw those electric fields away.
Yeah, can you go a little bit more into some of the other gadgets that you use to help keep these EMFs out of people's homes?
Yeah, so I mean that's kind of the main one, is the shielding paint, because it takes care of two things with one go. So because you're taking care of the high frequency with the paint, and then the low frequency electric shields, because you're actually grounding that paint that's conductive.
How much is the paint?
Oh, the paint it's pretty expensive. It retails for $808 for 5 liters, or in US that's 1.33 gallons.
Wow.
But if you're looking online for like remediation for this, they sell canopies that are around $1,300 or $1,500, and they're only shielding up to 3 gigahertz. So when you keep that in mind, you kind of realize that, okay, well, this isn't that bad. And then if you actually get an assessment done, by a Geovital consultant like myself, or I think there's maybe only 3 other people in the United States right now, then you get it for about a 20% discount. So it's about $678 per bucket at that point.
How many coats would you need to put on the walls? Is it a one-time deal and then you're good up to the 20 gigahertz, or do you have to put a few coats down?
Yeah, you just the gold standard is 2 coats to get the attenuation that we like to see, especially in places with really high electromagnetic radiation from the cell phone towers and everything. But for some people, if they live in an apartment or something and they don't know if they want to move, I'll recommend that they could do 1 coat, and then you've got some protection from the high frequency, and then you're protected from the electric fields as well. And some people opt for that, or they'll do the other thing that we do for the windows and things, is we have this fabric that's made, has different metals infused in it. It's called the Nova fabric. And we use that as curtains, or you can actually make a sleeping canopy out of that. And that does really well up to 8 gigahertz. And it's about, it's a much better fabric than a lot of the other fabrics that are on the market too, because it shields at those much higher frequencies, whereas the other ones are, that's one thing that really bugged me when I was searching for solutions, is I would go online and search, and people would advertise things as 99.99% effective. You think, oh, that's really good. I'd be doing really good if I bought this. But then you look at the fine print or the test reports, and it's up to 1 gigahertz, and if it's only that effective up to 1 gigahertz, and they're not advertising at, the 3G that my cell phone uses, or 4G or 5G, or the 20 gigahertz that these cell phone towers are operating at, then it's worthless at those levels. So, when I found out about that, I was like, I need to find something that works better. And that's why I've really liked working with Geovital. Is they're the naturopathic clinic, and they actually put in solutions that work for people. It's not about just selling them a product. It's about, we follow up with people. They really match the style of my practice, with being a practice with integrity, and one that's concerned with getting people well, not just selling them a product. So we follow up with people in my practice, and we make sure that they're doing well, and that all the solutions put in are working as they should work to remediate the different radiation stressors that we find.
I know there's also some protective clothing out there. Do they do a whole lot of good for you, or is that kind of just a marketing scheme as well?
Well, I kind of am on the fence a little bit about this, because the clothing, I think it helps to reflect something away that's a direct contact with the body tissue. But at the same time, if the body is like an antenna, then no matter what, if any part of your body is hit by that radiation, then the whole body is getting hit with it. So it doesn't make perfect sense that you're going to be absolutely protected by just wearing a shirt or underwear or something like that that's shielded, because if your head is still exposed and you're not wearing like a beekeeper outfit where everything is covered, then you're always going to be, I'm always going to be able to test a person, and it'll be the same high voltage in the person's body as if they weren't wearing anything at all. So it's kind of one of those things that I kind of think, it might help a little bit, but really it's, when you actually use the meter and test the body, it doesn't make a difference whatsoever.
Mm-hmm. So there's also cell phone cases that are supposed to protect from EMFs. How do those work? Because I'm assuming that you would want your cell phone to be able to still receive calls and messages and whatnot. So I would then assume that it's not actually blocking out those high frequencies that you would need to block out to protect yourself. Is that right?
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, truly, you're not going to be able to use your cell phone without having some exposure. That's just the way that technology works, But the best ones I've seen out there are the ones my wife makes some, and then Geovital makes some. And what they do is they actually put in 2 layers of shielding between your body and the cell phone. And the other things that I've seen on the market, they don't do that. They just have the one side of the phone blocked, and then the sides, the actual sides of the phone, like the face of the phone is blocked, but the sides of the phone are open. And so all that radiation is seeping out and still getting your body. If you can see it, think of it like a light bulb, like your cell phone. If your cell phone's a light bulb, where's the light getting out? And that's how if the radiation is seeping through. So you try to hold up your cell phone and make sure you can't see any side of your phone. And if you can see any side of your phone, and there's no barrier between you and the phone, then that's not going to be a good case for you. So a lot of them just have a flap that you push down, and I think it's probably better than nothing. But they advertise it, and they test those, a lot of the covers with the wrong meters, and it's not, there's a lot of deception that goes on in this field, and I kind of get tired of it a lot of times.
I'm sure there's a lot of people trying to just jump on the marketing bandwagon to sell product, and it's not really benefiting people. It's just a way for them to make money. And being a practitioner like yourself who sees through it, I'm sure is really frustrating.
Yeah, and a lot of times I see people so worried about like being exposed during the daytime, and like, oh, I can't work at my new job because of this or that, because they have Wi-Fi on all the time. And there are people that are sensitive to really hypersensitive to the radiation and everything in those environments. But what I've found and what Geovital has found is that the most important place to protect yourself is the bedroom, because that's when your body is actually restoring and repairing tissues, and your brain is being flooded with melatonin. And I don't know if you're aware of this. I think you might be. There's a new discovery in 2013 of this detoxification system in the brain that only detoxes at nighttime when you're sleeping, and it's called the glymphatic system. They didn't know about this before 2013. They always thought that the brain didn't really have a detoxification system. They thought that it was just the lymph. But actually at night, what happens is your brain shrinks by about 40%, and all the brain cells shrink by about 40%. And so it creates all this intercellular space, and then melatonin floods the brain, and basically it's like a very potent antioxidant. So it neutralizes all this oxidation from the brain and the stress, the metabolic waste and everything, and it flushes it out of the cerebral spinal fluid in the back of the neck. And it's dependent on melatonin for that whole system to work properly. And I think that's probably the number one reason why, once you fix these stressors in the bedroom, your body is able to heal. And one thing I didn't talk about is that the radio frequencies actually cause leaky gut, and also a permeable blood-brain barrier. And that's been shown in study after study after study. And once you fix that sleeping environment, that whole glymphatic system is able to work properly, and your brain's able to kind of reset for the next day. And I've seen people like wake up rested, not needing coffee anymore. And even though they didn't want to give up their coffee, they're like, "Hey, what did you do to me? We shielded my bedroom, and now I don't want coffee anymore. And I really loved having my cup of coffee in the morning." But they're just, what it comes down to is they're feeling rested and restored, and and their body's able to do what it is meant to do naturally, and detoxify and get the rest that it needs.
Is there a certain amount of time you need to be sleeping before that detoxification process kicks in?
Yeah, I think it's. I haven't studied that extensively, but I think that it has to do with the REM sleep, actually. So they say that there's a lot of different sleep experts out there, and this is kind of a new field, so they're really still kind of studying it. And I haven't seen many. Maybe there's one book out about it that I have on my list of things to read. But it's a very, very new field of study with this glymphatic system. So it's one of those things that's kind of like still being studied, and we don't know everything about it yet.
Yeah, so it would be, not only do you need to make sure that your body's releasing more melatonin so you can get into this detoxification pathway, but you need to make sure you're getting adequate sleep regardless. And a lot of people don't get enough of that.
Exactly.
So if we take sleep out of the picture, which should be around a third of your day, what are some permanent ways that we can address the man-made EMF radiation issue?
Yeah, well, a lot of people choose to shield their whole house with paint. There's a video on the Geovital website about a whole house shielding, where they actually shield the whole house, and the paint is black. So because it's made out of graphite and carbon, and so they actually painted the whole house black with 2 layers, and then and shielded the whole house that way from the high frequency. But yeah, during the day, you could do that. I've kind of started to recommend to people to try to sleep in a reduced radiation or radiation-free environment when they're eating too, because all of these frequencies do stimulate the sympathetic nervous system. And so if you're eating in a sympathetic state, you're not going to be digesting your food, because that's a parasympathetic process. We know all that from our training and everything. I'm sure you've talked about that on your podcast somewhat. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, so yeah, I've kind of started recommending that to people. And then if ever you want to relax, you know, try to reduce the radiation. And when you're doing any kind of therapy or anything that involves that parasympathetic state, you know, try to reduce the radiation as much as possible. So the way we do that in homes is the shielding paint, and then turning off, you know, breakers with the automatic switches and things like that. But yeah, you know, during the daytime, you know, what we really do try to focus on is that sleeping area. And what we found is that if you just fix that, then the body can handle a certain amount of stress during the day. But so long as you have that area to return to, that sleeping sanctuary where your body can heal and restore at night, then you don't really have to worry about so much about the stressors that you're exposed to during the daytime.
What's some easy first steps that people can take to reduce the exposure in their home without going to the paint or get some of these expensive canopies? What can they do to get started tonight?
Yeah, well, I think some of the easiest things are, you know, getting a little. A lot of people are really attached to their Wi-Fi, and if you can get away from that, it's optimal to have go back to the Ethernet cables and hook up your desktops and laptops to Ethernet, and that's a really good first step. If you're still attached to your Wi-Fi because you want to connect to your mobile phone or tablet or whatever, then at least turn the Wi-Fi off at night. And the easiest way to do that is to get one of those timers that people use for lamps when they're on vacation. And I don't know, I'm kind of old school. I like the little push timers, but I guess they have digital ones now. But you know, you just click which time you want the Wi-Fi to go off and then turn back on. And that way you don't have to think about it. You know, it goes off at like, okay, I'm not going to be on the computer or the internet, you know, after 10 p.m. So I'm going to turn it off at 10. It's going to cut the internet off and the power. You know, it can't just cut the internet, it has to cut the power to the router off. Otherwise, it's sending an empty signal out that's still damaging. So cut the power off to the Wi-Fi router, and then it'll come on at like 7 or 8 a.m. whenever you get up and normally check your email or your social media or whatever in the morning. So that's one thing with the Wi-Fi. Some other things are, you know, turn off the wireless on your wireless printer. A lot of printers now just come with wireless and it's on. And then there's wireless keyboards, wireless mouse, you know, and also the cordless decked phones. Those are even worse than Wi-Fi routers.
Really?
Yeah.
How so?
Well, they emit a much stronger signal.
Interesting.
Yeah, so those are really, you know, detrimental. I've seen those at like really high signals, high body measurements, and everything too. And then you know, we talked a little bit about the baby monitors. Um, yeah, that's most of the things. Some people's security systems in their house rely on wireless signals, so trying to switch to something that's more um, that's not wireless is good. And then there's also the smart meter issue. So a lot of people have these smart meters installed, and there's this, you know, the best way to deal with the smart meters is probably the shielding paint, but they also make these covers where you can do some do-it-yourself covers that will kind of dampen the signal, and you can just search that on YouTube, like DIY smart meter cover, and you can find out how to make one out of Reflectix or aluminum mesh or whatever. But on the videos, don't worry about grounding. Grounding has nothing to do with the high frequency radiation. Just cover the meter, and it basically creates what they call a Faraday cage and doesn't let the signal it basically dampens the signal. So your electric company won't come knocking on your door because the signal didn't get through, but it'll definitely reduce the intensity of it.
Is there a difference between wireless or Wi-Fi and like Bluetooth?
No, not really. I mean, they're just you know, the same frequencies, but just different technology, different hardware. So they, you know, it's the same type of radiation. It's still microwave or radio frequency radiation. And yeah, there's not really a difference as far as like how to shield it or what it does. It does the same thing. It will cause that permeable blood-brain barrier, permeable gut membrane.
And is one better than the other when it comes to Wi-Fi or cell coverage? If you're just using like your mobile data compared to using the Wi-Fi data?
Yeah, actually, well, it's also kind of individual, but I know with my meter that measures the body, if you're using your mobile data, it's going to be a lot more intense than using your Wi-Fi during the day. So if you kind of think about that as like, okay, I've got my phone here, and what's it doing? It's communicating with my Wi-Fi router, which is 20 feet away. You know, so what I do is I turn my phone on airplane mode, and then I turn the Wi-Fi on if I'm going to use my data, and or an app or whatever, and then I'm only sending that information 20 feet, so the signal doesn't have to be as intense, and it doesn't show up as much on my meter. But if I turn my Wi-Fi off and I'm using the mobile data, that reading will skyrocket, and it'll be much worse and much more intense because it has to go all the way to the cell phone tower and back with that data to travel. So it has to push out with much more power to get to that antenna and then receive that signal right back.
That makes sense.
So yeah, the connecting to the Wi-Fi is actually much less detrimental than connecting to your data on your mobile phone.
And then finally, you talked earlier about more of like natural radiation or the geopathic stress. What can we do about that, and how does that affect us? Does it affect us the same way as these man-made type radiation, or is it different?
It's a little bit different. I mean, this has been around forever, since the creation of the Earth, and there's a huge tradition that dates back to thousands of years, in the Chinese literature, and also even as far back as like the Greco-Roman literature about geopathic stress. So, one of the stories I like to tell is how, like, in ancient Greece and Rome, before they would build any building, they would have sheep graze on the land for a year long, and then determine whether that was a good place to build or not, whether it was a healthy place to build. And they would, the way that they would do that is they'd have the sheep graze there, and then after a year they would check the sheep and see how healthy they were. And if they were healthy, then they would go ahead and build there. If they weren't, then they would try to find a new place. And there was just kind of an easy way to test to see if that was a healthy spot to build. And then, the Chinese have had a tradition of the feng shui, and before that was more in line with the geopathic stress, and determining where that was, and making sure that they weren't building on that or anything. But now it's kind of turned into this more like fashion, and home decorating type of thing, which is a little bit sad. But I mean, I guess it still has some principles of it in there. But yeah, as far as like what geopathic stress is, it's the Earth's magnetic field, which we talked about earlier, and in Europe, for several decades, I think since about the 1920s or 30s, they've known like the places where the Earth's magnetic field crosses, they've known those as cancer crossings. And so they had this one guy who was who would go from town to town and map out the towns and detect where these crossing points are. And also there's things like underground water currents that get under extreme pressure and create an energy that comes up from the Earth, a high magnetic field. And then there's also like wherever there's fault lines or metals and minerals mixing together, called ground mixing, those can create an energy as well, and those rise up and create a stressful magnetic field as well. So basically this guy, he would travel to these towns in Europe, and he would map out the geopathic stress lines, and he had a policeman following him around, making sure that he wasn't talking to any of the people and things like that. And so he mapped everything out, and then they compared it with the medical records with the local town doctor, and it correlated 100%. Every place where there was a crossing point or a water vein going through a person's bed, that person had cancer. And
interesting.
Yeah, and they've done that multiple times in city after city, and it was always the same result, 100% correlation. And so when I'm looking at like statistics like this and this tradition of learning about this geopathic stress, it's pretty incredible that we haven't really talked about that or done anything about this over in the West. But over in Europe, it's very common. People know what it is, and the people that go and test it over there are called dowsers. So they'll come with their copper rods and their dowsing equipment, and they'll douse the home. And over there they actually pay dowsers hundreds of thousands of dollars. There's some companies that pay them that much just to find out where this missing water pipe is that they lost the plans to, or to find out where the oil is to where to dig. And it's kind of an amazing tradition over there, and I feel really privileged to kind of bring that to the United States and start working with people on remediating it.
So do they have better systems over there to keep EMFs out of people's homes as well?
Yeah, well, the Geovital is based in Austria, so
okay.
We're kind of bringing their systems over here through them, and there's all different kinds of ways that people have dealt with that, and I think most people have settled on, okay, you can either have your house look like you live in a spaceship, or you can have it look like a normal home with the shielding paint and the curtains and fabric and everything. And that's kind of the goal, is to make it look nice so that you don't look like you're some tinfoil hat person.
Mm-hmm.
And have a normal looking house that's also healthy, and made so it's like the most optimal environment for your healing.
So speaking of houses and optimal environments for healing, you recently built a tiny home that's completely shielded from EMFs, correct?
Yeah, and we're not completely done with it, but we've finished the outside, and I've incorporated some shielding measures on the inside already. But I'm about halfway done with the shielding that I want to do, because on the trip I've been able to test different places where we've had the tiny house and everything, and not quite what I want. But I also don't have the curtains up, so I'm hoping that once we get everything finished on the inside with the walls and everything, then we'll be able to kind of do a demonstration on all of that, and I'll post it up on my website.
Can you talk a little bit about the process of building the tiny home and some of the components you've added in to keep all the radiation out? Is it the same idea of what you've talked about already?
Yeah, some of it. Yeah. If you're going to do something, if you're going to start from scratch, there's a lot that you can do that will kind of cut down on the cost, because the shielding paint is kind of expensive. But I'm going to actually end up using the shielding paint anyway, just because I want to make sure that everything's sealed up as well as possible and do everything perfectly. But basically on the outside, what we did was I did a house wrap that was made of this inert type of foam that has a radiant barrier attached to it. So I didn't really want to do the plastic Tyvek house wrap and support DuPont and things like that. So we went that route with this type of house wrap called low E house wrap, and that kind of had a dampening effect on a lot of the high frequency radiation. But then on top of that, we did steel siding rather than aluminum or something else, because the steel actually has a very high attenuation rate against the high frequency radiation. And then we also did a metal roof. So the steel siding is basically the number, like the first barrier that protects us from the cell phone towers and everything that's coming from outside. And then on the inside for electric fields, I had these grounded threaded rods that are meant for structural support for the tiny house. They are bolted to the bottom of the trailer, and then they go all the way up to the top plate of the framing where the roof is. And I use those as actual grounding rods. So when I ground the trailer, then I can just tie in my grounding to those rods, and then attach that to the mesh for the lofts that goes underneath the flooring for the lofts, so that if there's any electric fields coming from the kitchen or the living space below where like a light fixture is or something like that, that it won't be able to penetrate up into the sleeping areas in the lofts. So I kind of have that all open right now so people can come in and see like how we did that and everything. And then when we finish our trip and we get to Cleveland, where my father-in-law lives and he has some land, we're gonna finish the inside of the tiny house and incorporate more like shielding paint and the geopathic stress mats and things like that into the flooring and the lofts and everything.
I would have thought that metal would have been like a giant antenna. So it's interesting to hear that it kind of does the opposite.
Yeah, I mean, it can be an antenna for electric fields, but you just don't want to park it, below the electrical lines. And as long as the trailer is grounded, all of those fields are basically going through that metal and down to the ground instead of through your body. So I think that's probably something we should talk about real quick here, is the whole idea of grounding, because I think there's a huge misconception out there about the benefit of grounding in certain places, and it's just something that's really important to touch on here. So
Yeah,
if you
go
think
for
about
it.
yeah, if you think about grounding as like, okay, just kind of put this picture in your mind of like a low-hanging electrical line. And, the birds are always up on the electrical lines and they're fine. But if there was a low-hanging electrical line and you jump up and grab onto that, you won't get electrocuted so long as your foot does not touch the ground, right? But as soon as your foot touches the ground, you're toast. So if you think about grounding like that, like a lot of people have these grounding sheets in their bedrooms, and they're in contact with them, and they have the electricity on in their room. All that electricity is going through you, just as if you're grabbing onto that wire, and then you're touching the ground. So you're being a conduit for those electric fields to go to the ground. So it's electrocuting you on a small, non-lethal level, but it is having a biological effect. And so, it's the same thing like if you're going down a slide at the playground and you try to shock someone, that electricity is traveling from you to the person that's on the ground. But as soon as you touch your foot to the ground, you can't shock them anymore because that electricity has left your body.
Interesting. So the people that have those grounding pads, sometimes they'll sleep on them or do whatever on them. As long as the electricity is still turned on in their house, then that electricity is going through them into the grounding mat, and it's not protecting them?
Yeah, basically they're attracting the electric fields in the room to them because they're grounded.
So it's making it worse.
So yeah, it's making it worse. The grounding needs to be thought of more as a barrier to keep the electric fields away from you, not as something that you use to discharge, when you're in your house. Now, if you're out in nature and there's no electrical fields anywhere, then being attached to the ground will actually have some, on a quantum level, have some effect on releasing electrons into the earth and getting, a good energy from the earth. But, as far as like grounding in your home or around places that have electric fields, you want to use the grounding mats as a barrier, and you never want to be in direct contact with them. So you do want to ground all your electronics. You can put the grounding sheet underneath your bed, but never sleep or be in contact directly with it.
I know some people that have those grounding pads and they just use them. They live in the city and they use them every single day. So I will have to tell them about that.
Yeah, and I just did a video, or I'm going to do a video on I'm staying at a colleague of mine's house, and she has a biomat, and we did a really interesting test yesterday with it, and there's a lot of things that claim that they're free of electromagnetic radiation, but it's only one type of radiation, so they don't test for the other types of radiation. So there's a way to ground a biomat that, or a way to shield a biomat so that you're free of electric fields, because it's built to be low EMF from magnetic fields, but not the electric fields. And so we found out a way to actually shield from the electric fields as well, so you can actually get a really good therapeutic dose of infrared therapy through the biomat when you incorporate the grounding technology into it. But you have to have a barrier between you and the grounding pad.
Got it. You mentioned earlier that you do house calls. You go into people's houses and you test them. Can you talk about your process and how people can find you?
Yeah, so my website is primalhealingrhythms.com, and if you go on there, you can kind of see all the services that I offer and everything. But basically, the home health assessment that I do, I'm traveling around the United States right now. We're in Austin, Texas right now. We're going to go to Louisiana, some of those other southern states I don't know so well, all the way to Florida, and then up through Georgia, South Carolina, Kentucky, Tennessee, and then Ohio. Then I'll probably do an East Coast tour as well, going up to the New England area and New York and some of those places. And then back in September, October, I'll be back on the West Coast doing stuff in the Pacific Northwest and then down to California. But basically, it's a 2 to 3 hour home evaluation process, and I check for the 3 man-made types of radiation: the high frequency from cell phone towers and Wi-Fi and all that, and then the low frequency electric and low frequency magnetic fields. And then we also test for the geopathic stress in the bedrooms. And the idea with the assessment is to kind of get a game plan, because so many people are like, oh, it's so overwhelming. Well, I don't want it to be overwhelming for people. I want to go to their home, test everything, figure it out, and then we can go stage by stage and prioritize the process. So you actually have a plan in place of like, okay, I'm going to take care of this problem once and for all. First I do this, then I do this, then I do this. Or if money is no object, just do everything at once, But a lot of people, they just need to take time and do it step by step, and that's okay. It just, I really like for people to have a plan in place to take care of it, because once you do, all of your nutritional protocols are going to work better. Everything you're doing to improve your health is just going to work so much better. And that's what I've seen in my practice. And, that's what Geovital has continually seen in their 35-year experience as a naturopathic clinic.
Awesome. Do you also have some social media platforms that people can find you at?
Yeah. So if you go to, Facebook, I'm there under Primal Healing Rhythms. And you can like my page there, and that's kind of my main social media outlet right now that I use.
So you also mentioned that you do some retreats to Hawaii. Can you talk about those and what all happens down at those retreats?
Yeah, basically, we teach the healing rhythms that the name of my business is kind of coined after. And, it's just like the whole idea of, getting into the rhythm of how humans are meant to live, and like waking up with the sun, and like, different relaxation things you can do, teaching people actually about the reflex points that we learned with Nutritional Therapy Association, and how to therapeutically use those to your advantage during the day. If you're feeling stress, or you feel like your liver is toxic or whatever. And then, also different ways to do proper breathing exercises, and addressing light exposures and dark exposure, and all the different types of rhythms that you can kind of get into that will help your body to be optimal. And one of the most exciting things that's happening right now is that we're getting together with a bunch of fellow nutritional therapy practitioners and holistic practitioners, and we're organizing. We're actually going to purchase some land over there in Hawaii. So I'm flying out there in June to do a geopathic stress assessment on this land. and we're going to have like a nutritional therapy association is going to kind of have a conglomeration of practitioners that are going to come in and join in and start this retreat center that's also going to be a beyond organic farm. And I'm on the board for that, so we're hoping to get that jump started by January or February of next year.
That sounds like a really neat project.
Yeah, we're really excited. That whole idea is that we can have all these practitioners starting to develop retreats and use the facilities for a vastly discounted price, and we can we'll have like fishing boats, and like we're going to start a CSA on the island there, and have a farm with goats and pigs and maybe some cows and chickens and everything, and then we're going to grow everything like all the typical tropical fruit and hopefully a lot of veggies and things like that. So and then every facility, because of me, is going to be shielded from all the electromagnetic radiation and geopathic stress. So we're hoping to make it like the most optimal healing place in the entire world, right there on the Big Island.
Oh, that would be nice. I feel like a lot of people could benefit from that.
Yeah, we're excited about it. So
I've seen you do some photos, or not photos, but videos before, where you demonstrate different ways that people think are protecting you from EMFs, and then you'll show with your meter how it's really not protecting you that much. Are those videos available for people to see, or is that only in select Facebook groups that you've posted those?
Yeah, I kind of post those in select Facebook groups and don't have them widely distributed just because I don't want to deal with the retaliation from those companies.
Makes sense.
But yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of products out there that claim to do something and they don't really do much of anything. They're relying on that placebo effect to get their results and their testimonials and things like that. And that's one of the things that's kind of hard as a holistic practitioner or even functional medicine practitioner is, there is this placebo effect that happens. And so if there's anything that's a little bit that doesn't really work, then people can have a lot of success just with that placebo effect. And so, if people aren't familiar with that, they can read up on the history of the placebo effect, and even conventional medicine accepts that as something that happens, and it's actually something that we should use to our advantage. And if something is a catalyst for you to have that placebo effect, that's great, keep using it. But just know that if it's not verifiable and it doesn't go beyond the placebo effect statistic, then it probably isn't really doing much. Your mind is actually helping you heal.
Well, thank you, Brian, for coming on and talking about EMFs. I don't know a whole lot about EMFs, but I feel like I have a pretty good conception about it now. And thank you for going over so many different ways, being able to protect your bedroom and protect your family and kids from all this radiation.
Yeah, no problem. It was a pleasure talking to you and sharing the information. I just hope it helps some people out there.
Oh, I know it will. Okay, to find out more about Brian Hoyer, go to primalhealingrhythms.com. You can also see where he's located currently in the U.S. And see if he will be coming through your area to do a home inspection. Okay, if you enjoyed this episode of the Summit for Wellness podcast, please subscribe on whatever podcast app that you are listening to. And if you are on iTunes, please go to the ratings and reviews tab and leave us a review and a rating. That way, that helps other people to find our show and to spread this information. And we will see everyone next time.